I'm going to set in my phone. Spam risk.
Well, we're live now, so here we are with the UK, Kevin Thistle, my real estate appraiser contact, and my father-in-law. So, you know, good connection here in our real estate family between Brenna and title. Kevin is an appraiser, me in real estate. It's quite a good little dynamic. So been looking forward to this one for quite some time, and I get a lot of questions from clients all the time. Where should I be spending my money? What should I be doing? What's going to add value? What's the appraiser going to think? And before we dive really all into that, I think the overarching thing that we'll probably discuss, Kevin, is it really depends. Every home is a little different. Every neighborhood, every community is a little bit different. So there's not usually going to be a blanket statement that just says people will pay more for X and this is how much they're going to pay. So we'll get down that rabbit hole here in a little bit. Yet before we do, Kevin, why don't you tell us a little bit about you, your history? You're a Florida guy that's been in Colorado now 20 years. Give us a little bit about your history.
Yeah, I'm a Florida guy. I grew up on the beach, and now I'm a mountain expert. Matter of fact, I am an expert of all my domain, 60 miles in any direction, basically. When I started appraising here in Colorado in early 2000s, I was new to Appraise America. I had 8 years worth of commercial and residential real estate experience in Florida, and that was a kick. But the commercial background taught me how to investigate markets, and that's how you become an expert. I mean, my wife is an expert in certain markets, right? And she's a nurse. Anybody can be an expert in their own market. What we do is not rocket science, but we just pay attention. We ask good questions. We have good work ethics. So, real estate's fun. What you do is probably more fun than what I do. I'd rather be a developer, but my wife said no to that, so I'm an appraiser. How about that?
Yeah, it's good. And one of the few appraisers that I've known that is actually very willing to just be very transparent and have a conversation. One of the things about Kevin is he likes to he's a very friendly guy. He likes to chat and be gregarious. So specific questions, you can always reach out. We'll get you connected to Kevin, and he's happy to bend your ear for a little bit.
Yeah, I'm afraid my wife says I'm too chatty. Even one of my son-in-laws, I won't say who exactly, says I am very chatty, but I guess that gift of gab gives me an opportunity to talk with a lot of realtors. I confirm every sale, every pending sale, every listing that I use, because the data that you guys put in the MLS there on the computer, it's good stuff, but it's incomplete. If I really want to know what's going to drive value, I call and I go, "Hi, Matt, this is Kevin. I'm doing some work in the area. I see that you've got a pending sale. Looked like it was on the market just for a few days. Tell me about it." And then the realtor starts telling me all sorts of different stuff because they love to talk about their properties. And then I ask them specific questions like, how many offers did you have? And how many showings and what drove value? I mean, well, the view was great, or the updated kitchen was great, or the additional garage. My wife says, I'm just a man. What do I know? So anything I know that I'm telling you today, it's because I talk to buyers and sellers and realtors, and I'm like a reporter. I have no opinion, at least not one that I would share openly immediately, because my opinion doesn't mean anything. What's actually going on there on the front lines, what you guys do, is what's important. And that's why people pay me to do what I do, because I'm chatty.
Well, I think from the real estate agent's perspective, buyers and sellers, your opinion really matters, because there's a lot that ends up riding on that opinion. Is the contract going to appraise? What does this look like? Are there conditions? So the opinion matters, yet it's a opinion based on, okay, what is the data telling you, right? It all
Exactly.
goes back to
Exactly.
data. It's reviewing numbers. It's not sexy. It's kind of boring. It's just reviewing data.
Right. And you know, I know I've watched you and Brenna on these monthly shows, and she gets a lot of hard data from the title company, and then she tries to make sense of it. And you do the same thing from the from the MLS and say, well, we had so many sales, we had so many pendings, we have so many listings, and there's some leading indicators and some lagging indicators and that kind of stuff. What I try and do is make sense of those numbers. What are those numbers really telling us? And are they macro numbers or micro numbers? Do they apply to all the submarkets we have here in the metro area? Or is it just this mountain community? Or is it just this condo community in Lakewood? Or is it a new developing area, up in Thornton or in Commerce City? So, trying to make sense of those numbers and articulating that is really what's important, because I was having a conversation with a trainee of mine today, and we were talking about that kind of thing. And she was asking good questions about different things. My answer was, it depends. And they hate that and they laugh because it really does depend. Sometimes you can have a larger lot and it will mean maybe a bit of a premium. And other times it means absolutely nothing at all. It's how does that feature fit in the market today with the relatively lack of inventory that we have and the strong demand. And we have strong demand in spite of the COVID, because a lot of people who are buying houses are able to work from home. Interest rates are artificially low and just crazy, stupid low. So there's a lot of demand. So, if a buyer comes in and says, I'd really like for you to do this and that. I want you to buy me a new furnace or a new water heater, or I want you to do this. And the buyer says, no, I'm not going to do that. I got 3 other guys waiting in line. Take it or leave it. And I look at it and I go, what drives value? It has all the bedrooms I want, all the bathrooms I want. It has that extra big garage I want. Can I buy myself a water heater easier than I can build an additional garage? Sure. I'm not going to argue over that. That's $1,000 versus $10,000 or $20,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so very situational. How does that feature impact that house in that community, and of course what's going on with the market? So a couple of the questions, and we asked this on Facebook here before we went live. Now again, if you're watching this video and you've got specific questions, type down into the chat box, let us know. We'll if they're on topic, try to get them answered as best we can. But go ahead and interact, let us know that you're here. So we wanted to talk, really, one area is about solar panels. Solar panels are one of those, and I did a quick Google search earlier that just as to solar panels, just typed in solar panels into Google, it came up with a number of different websites that are selling it, and some of the information that's coming, this is coming specifically from the people that are selling it, saying that it adds over 3% value to the cost of the home. So as an appraiser, let me get your perspective as to what the data has told you around solar panels. And we'll talk both about leased and owned here in just a minute, but just overall general, what's happening with solar panels?
Let me start out with the pat answer. It depends. Okay? It depends what market you're in, whether you're in Boulder or Denver, whether you're in Lakewood or Wheat Ridge, or whether you're in Thornton or, Highlands Ranch. I've done a lot of these homes with these supplemental systems, and we call them solar panels or solar systems. The technical term for it is photovoltaic, and it is a supplemental system. I've only done one in the last few years that was standalone off the grid. And they had an older system, but they updated their system with battery backup that was propane generator, kind of thing. They also put up additional solar panel arrays. Okay, so they added more solar panels, on the roof. Or this particular place was up in Idaho Springs, and they had it sitting on a big post, like a satellite dish, the old-fashioned satellite dishes would be. Okay, and what the realtors are telling me, and what the data tells me, because the data really just raises questions. But these solar systems, as people will call them, these supplemental systems, they're nice to have, but they're not the number one thing that drives value. What drives value are bedrooms, bathrooms, garage, overall condition of the property. Is it an older property? Is it a new home? Is it has it been updated or renovated? Those things are much more important. The salespeople and the enthusiasts on this thing, and I think the technology is cool, and it is getting better and better and better, to be sure. But it just depends on what people want. If they're looking for a house that fits all their other criteria, it's like, well, it also has this solar system. Question is, do you own it? Do you lease it? How much money do you owe on the loan? A real problem for the realtors and for buyers is if it's leased, and then you have to assume that, and especially on an entry-level property or FHA, where your debt ratio, you guys have figured out exactly how much your mortgage payment can be, and then you add an additional payment for this solar array. Mm-hmm. I talked to a guy 5 years ago up in Thornton. He had 5 different contracts that all crashed and burned. It was in a starter neighborhood up in Thornton, and they were all FHA. And, that was the first time that I really saw that have an effect. So in that case, it really didn't add value. It subtracted value from the whole thing.
And because owning that house also comes with a supplementary payment that I now have to, or a debt that I have to incur, right, to be in that house.
Well, that's exactly right. So if it's leased, you don't own it, but you still have that payment. Yep. If you own it and you took out some kind of separate loan for that, what does that payment do? Or if you took money out of savings or some other investment, what's your opportunity cost on that, right? So you sit there and do the math, and it's nice to have a lower monthly utility bill, but I'm paying $100 less, but my loan payment is $110. And I've got this buddy of mine, a tennis buddy of mine. We had lunch together a few months back, and he wanted to know exactly what you're asking. And I said, the best place for you to spend your money are kitchens and bathrooms. The realtors will tell you that, or to update things. And he goes, well, I really want to buy these new photovoltaic systems and put solar panels on my roof and that kind of thing. And he says, how much do you think I'll get? And I said, well, just a wild guess. You might get 75 cents on the dollar. If you do a kitchen, you'll definitely get, if you do it right, $1 or more back on that investment. And he said, if I can get most of my investment back, 75 cents on the dollar would be good. I feel like I'm doing the right thing, so I'll go ahead and do it. Right. So it's just not a financial thing. Some people just like the technology, or they're very enthusiastic about the environment, and they think this is the right way to do it. So it's a lot more that goes into that decision than just, oh yeah, this will add value, because the salesman will tell you, the solar panel guys, they will tell you that it adds so much, just like those gutter guys. Oh, you got new gutters and it's going to add 10% to value. No, it's not. It speaks to overall condition of the house, overall utility. But as far as one thing adding value, those aren't on the top. Having those things that you live with every day, your kitchen, your bathroom, your garage, your bedrooms, updated condition, and not 1970s burnt orange carpet and almond green appliances.
It's probably coming back, right? That's the trends, right? They go through.
I hear bronze is coming back for that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it does go back to, if you want solar panels on your house, and we're not saying do it or don't do it. What we are saying is don't make the financial decision that it's going to add value be the driving factor. If you feel good about having solar panels on your house, if you want the lower monthly budget on your utilities and you want those other things, by all means, those are things that you can do and spend money for. Just understand what it is that you're getting. Because the solar panels aren't necessarily going to see a return. If you've got the only house in the community with solar panels, the buyers are still going to pay what the community is going to bring. If you're the only house without solar panels, well, it might be a conversation to have as you look at being the one that has now the lowest standard features. But as we move forward from solar panels, Kevin, another big one is, well, let's finish the basement, right? I'm going to spend $35,000 or $50,000 to finish my basement, and it's going to add all this value. I'm going to get $100,000 out of this by finishing my basement. What's your take here on spending all this money for finished basements?
It depends. It does. Is it a walkout basement? Do you have high ceilings, or is it a 1950s where you barely have a 7-foot ceiling? What kind of windows do you have down there? Do you get a lot of natural light? If you're going to spend any money in your basement, the first thing you want to consider, at least one of the first things, is putting in one of those emergency egress windows that allows a fireman to come in with an air tank on his back and save somebody in case you have a fire. But on a day-to-day basis, it brings in more light. It makes it more appealing. So if you're going to finish your basement with an additional bedroom, if you have 3 bedrooms upstairs and you have another kid, absolutely. What you're doing is you're adding a bedroom down there.
Yeah.
Okay. And adding a bedroom or additional living space, especially in the time of COVID, because we need home offices, dens, studies, lofts, basements, those kind of things. And I see that a lot. And in talking with the realtors to confirm sales back in April or May, that's what they'd tell me. They'd say, what sold the house? We had an extra bedroom. What do you do with your 4th or 5th bedroom? You turn it into an office. I was at Evergreen at Highwan just on Sunday, and they turned their modest basement into a classroom for their kids. Mm-hmm. And it was great. And they had good light down there. It was not a walkout basement. And walkout basements in the mountains are different than basements here in the suburbs. But generally speaking, if you can finish your basement and add utility by a bedroom, and if you have a bedroom, you got to put a bath in there. Some kind of 3 functioning bath. Shower, sit, and shave, and you're good. It's like having a main floor bedroom, but only a half bath. Mm-hmm. Well, if you've got someone convalescing on the main floor and they have to be on one floor and can't climb stairs, how are they going to go take a shower if the only shower is upstairs? Yeah. So these are the kind of things you want to consider when you're looking to finish your basement or refinish it. Open floor plans are very nice. You don't need all that partitioning. You need very good light. These LED recessed lights are awesome, and they're relatively inexpensive. They really are. But that's the problem. That's the difference between a basement and a dungeon. Nice living space in some place that you don't really want to hang out. You only want your kids to be down there. So that's important. Maybe some insulation too, depending on where you are. New homes in the Denver city and county of Denver, and some of these other counties as well, they have to have that ceiling in the basement insulated. Mm-hmm. And I know you had to do that with your house. I was in a house down near Chatfield, just north of Chatfield, and the guy had an unfinished basement, but he had to put in all this insulation to get a certificate of occupancy. Now he says he's going to have to take all that insulation down to pull the wires, put the lighting, put up the drywall, and he'll have to replace the insulation as well. But I guess the point is, if you're going to update, it's just not meaning new carpet, new paint. Update it to today's standard. The size windows that you need, the lighting that you need, the air conditioning that you need, flooring. Carpet isn't necessary. Carpet's an easy decision, but great decisions for a lot of basements, especially if there's any chance of any backup water, are these vinyl planks. Some of this new product that they have, and I say it's new, it's been out maybe 5 years or more, that's really great stuff. And it will really hold up, and down in that kind of an environment works really well, especially if you have pets too. So,
yeah, so much easier
up to a modern standard. How about that?
Yeah, and again, we take a look at what is the community, what is the neighbors, the neighboring homes, what do they have, right? We look at, and you helped me price this beautiful property here on a lake for us that we sold earlier this year.
Oh, in Fort Collins.
Yeah, and it was unfinished basement. When we looked at the other comps, one of the things that we noticed was most of them were finished. Now, had this one been finished in the walkout basement, probably would have brought a little bit more. Yet ultimately, what sold that was the view, right? The best view, no matter what, there on the lake. When we look at those Dungeness type feel basements, if you're looking at only finishing that basement and you make it into a nice rec room with pool table, a movie theater type setup, it's probably not going to see the return on the same level as if you're adding bedrooms, bathrooms, updating and getting it up current as to what else that we're seeing, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That particular property, the view was great. The access to rec, just out your back door, basically, on that one. I think there were soccer or ball fields. There were even tennis courts with lights. And if it was here in Lakewood, I would have bought it. But it was a great property. But the thing when we talked about this, you identified what drives value, and then you focused in on that. And the other things are secondary and things that people can, take care of relatively easily. But you can't get that view. You can't be backing to open space. You can paint. You can put in new appliances. You can get new countertops. Almost anybody can do that in a short period of time. But you can't make up for those other things.
Absolutely, and I think some of these, we want to look at the updates that you want to do while you're living there and get the enjoyment out of them. If you're just looking to simply, hey, I want to do a couple of quick updates before I sell this house and I want to see a good return on the investment. Okay, let's look real close at what the neighbors have and what else that's looking at. So garage space. Now, garage space, I grew up in a house that had a 6-car detached garage with a 90-foot driveway on one section.
You were blessed.
Very blessed, right? If you like cars, it was the home to be in. Right? And we had, I think, at one point I counted 11 or 13 vehicles parked, and none of it looked like it was a junkyard. Right? It was just very fortunate for that. So I'm a big garage fan. Building a big detached garage in a shed, I may spend $100,000 to build this garage. Am I looking at another $100,000 as far as my return on the investment?
Probably not at that kind of a level, no. We just did 2 properties. One was in Lakewood, original brick ranch with a basement. Okay, it had been nicely updated, not renovated, where everything was redone, but it was turnkey condition, very pleasant. It had a 1-car attached garage, and they had recently built a 2-car detached garage there in the backyard. Shared, had one driveway in front, and they put another driveway on the south side of the house, and it worked out very well. that did add value, and they probably got pretty close to getting dollar for dollar on that one. Okay, because in Jefferson County, I don't care if you're in Arvada or Wheat Ridge or Lakewood, people like their cars and their vehicles because they either collect them, or it's a toy, or they have vehicles that are work vehicles. And if I got a '67 Mustang in cherry condition, I'm not parking that thing in the driveway. and you have a lot of people like that in Jefferson County. Now, adversely, we were out in Watkins, a nice ranch, probably about 17 years old, had been recently updated with new wood flooring. The kitchen was updated, had a nice open floor plan in the kitchen and family with high ceilings, and it was sitting on 2.5 acres, and it had a walkout basement that was unfinished, and they had a 3-car attached garage. Well, when you have acreage, at what point do you stop building garages? Because you got lots of area to park, right? Well, they went and they built this giant outbuilding that could house a semi. It was a recreational vehicle garage with 3 very tall overhead garage doors. And I was told that it cost them about $125,000 to build that. So if you're spending $100,000 on a little suburban garage, it better have a lift and it better have 3-phase power, because that's a lot. But out there in the country, in Watkins, in a nice little neighborhood, this big outbuilding was not uncommon at all. I mean, not everybody had them, but a lot of folks did. But did you get dollar for dollar on that? No. You know what? We found that you got about half, because how much demand is there for this giant garage? Now, it's not just a place to store your cars, especially when you're out there. And this guy happened to be a contractor, and he had a big vehicle in there, but it was also to store some of his work vehicles and have a place to work on things and prep things. So even though he knew it wasn't going to return dollar for dollar, part of that was a business decision, and he needed some place to put it. And I learned a lesson from a plumber I knew who kept having his warehouse broken into in the warehouse district, an industrial district, right? So he said, forget it. We're going to get a house. He got a house over near Kipling and 80th in Arvada, a ranch house, which they updated. But the thing that drove value for them was it had this outbuilding. Now, it wasn't this giant thing, but they could, it was plenty deep, and they could put any size truck or trailer in there, and they had place to prep things and store equipment. And the reason he did it is because he can keep an eye on it when it's on his property. So that's one of the reasons why in Jefferson County people like that, is because they've tried working out of these warehouses, but they're not secure. So sometimes it's not just, is this a good investment? Am I going to get my dollar back? Part of it is it's a business decision, and it's the most prudent decision that I can make. So, at what point do you find diminishing returns? Like if you have 3 bedrooms, that's good for most people. Nowadays, maybe even 4, because you need a home office. But would you get 10 bedrooms? How about if you had a house with 10 bedrooms? And you laugh, but I found one in Edgewater about 3 years ago, and I couldn't believe it. It's like, what are you all going to do here? And this guy made the addition. He had a large family, and maybe there were only 8 bedrooms, but it was a huge amount.
Yeah.
Okay. And he didn't get a lot of extra value for that because there weren't a lot of people looking for extra bedrooms, right? So at some point you got to listen to your realtor when the realtor says, I see your vision, but let's trim it down a little bit, right?
Well, and it's one thing to do these things because it fits your lifestyle and your need. Understand that everything has a rate of diminishing return. So I can spend money to make my
car go faster. I can spend money to make my wardrobe nicer. I can spend a lot of money to make my house nicer, bigger, take your pick. At some point, I'm just going to keep spending money to see a very little, or even in some cases, negative return.
Sure.
Right? So, where is that tipping point? Now, for me, my perspective is, let's take a look at the community. Let's take a look at the neighborhood, and let's not go 7 times as nice as everybody else. Let's look at, okay, does the neighboring house have, or all the neighboring homes have hard surface countertops, right? I mean, we're talking about the granite, the quartz. Do they have that? Do they have the luxury vinyl plank or luxury laminate type flooring? Is it hardwood flooring or is it worn out carpet? What do the neighbors have? And let's go a touch above so that we can sell, and there's a demand, there's a premium there for it, because yeah, people will pay for a home that's the nicest in the neighborhood. They're still not going to pay double for the neighborhood based on the house just because it's twice as nice.
But you're exactly right. And let's use a broad stroke application for kitchens. Mm-hmm. Let's say you want to spend 60 grand on a kitchen. A nice quality stone, whether it's quartz or granite. You've got custom cabinets. You've got some nice stainless steel appliances. But you got a galley kitchen. Mm-hmm. You got a 2-butt kitchen. Are you going to get dollar for dollar back on that? No. But if you're able to pop out that wall, or maybe have a half a wall and put in a breakfast bar and make it more appealing, and at least have the line of sight, especially if you have a nice view out your adjoining living room or family room, either to open space or the park or just to your yard where you've got a nice yard. It doesn't need to all be open, but if your line of sight goes out that way, you're able to enjoy it. Okay. And I've got dozens of examples to give you that, some of them personal, but I think anybody can relate to that. So if you're in the kitchen is definitely the center of a modern home, and formal dining rooms aren't as important as they used to be. Being able to just have this big space that maybe twice a year you can bring in the big dining room table or put the leaf in there, and you can entertain a lot of people for the holidays. The rest of the time, you have a normal sized table in your dining room, or you got a breakfast bar, and then you've got your big screen TV in your living room, and you got your higher ceilings and that kind of thing. But anything that makes that space feel more open is really good. And if someone's buying a townhouse, for example, you got an interior kind of a unit, but if you've got high ceilings and you got some windows, it doesn't feel so small anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And very often, your realtor will tell you, says, okay, this fits our needs on paper, but let's look at this thing. Mm-hmm. And when you take everything into consideration, you go, wow, this is really nice. And they ask you, well, how big is it? And you go, 1,200 square feet. You go, no way, it feels way bigger than that, right? So those are all things to take in consideration. Again, it goes back to that modern standard. On paper, you spend 60 grand in your kitchen, but if you didn't take care of the main, glaring problem is that it was enclosed and shut off from everybody, mm-hmm. then you really didn't solve the problem. You just put lipstick on a pig.
Well, if I spend $60,000 on a kitchen, and I'm spending $60,000 on a kitchen that is an $850,000 home, that might go a little bit further than if I'm spending maybe $30,000 on a kitchen and a $400,000 home.
Sure.
Right? So it's going to be very situational. It's going to be very dependent on what's the layout of the house, what's the configuration, what's the neighborhood doing. So a lot of factors are always going to go into it. So it's best to analyze the neighborhood, analyze the trends, what's happening, what do we need to do, because that's going to have the impact and value, and why we started this with the big caveat going to be, it depends. There's not a one size fits all with, here, let's plug and play this, and we'll get the return out of it. It's, some things we're going to do because we'll enjoy it while we're there, and some things we're going to do because we're going to get a return on the investment. And it's not always the same thing, and it's not always the same dollar amount.
Well, that's absolutely true. And you were talking about that earlier about looking at your neighborhood and then making it a little bit better than the average home in the neighborhood. You got to keep those things in perspective. If it falls into percentages really. That big RV outbuilding I told you about. Well, that was like a $800,000 home.
Mm-hmm.
So, as a percentage, it wasn't as big of a deal if maybe you had a $500,000 home just down the street on the same lot, but it was a 20-year-old house, and now this outbuilding or RV garage was way bigger than even the house.
Yeah.
Right? You got to keep things in perspective and in proportion. And a lot of times we'll want to update these things for our own use, which is a great guideline, but also use some common sense and see how it fits in the neighborhood. And as far as the artsy stuff goes, if you want to do some art, make sure it isn't on a wall that, is going to take a lot of work to cover up later on. Where you get this big tile, mural. I mean, may be beautiful. The mural may be more valuable than the house. But keep things in proportion and perspective for your neighborhood, because too, your neighborhood could be changing. The one we did the other day north of Ken Carroll, that down there. That was an old neighborhood, and there were maybe 6 houses spread out through there where they were basically close to $1 million homes there. And one house was on the market forever, and the problem is that it had junky houses next door, so it really drove down they lost $100,000 worth of value on that house based on what they thought it could bring. Our subject was on a street where 90% of the houses on the street were modern contemporary homes or in the process of being built. So that was good. So if you're putting in a luxury home, you want to have something similar next door, if not directly comparable, at least compatible. And you spend that kind of money, you don't want to be looking at a double wide.
Yeah.
So it's good to notice trends, but also position yourself in the best place in the middle of that trend, so that you don't have to wait 3 years for the market to catch up.
Yeah, and if you're looking to really have the dollar go the furthest, you're kind of looking what's the home that's at the bottom end of kind of the market for condition or quality, and how inexpensive can I get into that home. And then when I go to sell it, I want it to be at the top end of that market, yet I still want it to be within that market. I don't want it to be exponentially nicer than everything else that has been selling in that neighborhood. It's just, okay, I'm going to spend it to get it towards the top, and ultimately we'll get top dollar back out of that. So, as we finish up, I think we go back to it's very situational. Real estate is done on such a hyper local level. That's why, we see challenges with Zillow's estimates. And just a blanket, the housing market across the United States went up this much, or some of these studies that say solar panels are going to add 3% to the value of your home. It's all very situational. It all very depends. So if we're looking at the specific return for your specific property, well, let's have a conversation. We'll dive down into the community, the neighborhood, what's the trends, what's happening, and how much are we going to spend?
Exactly. And let me just make 2 comments on what you were saying. There are some neighborhoods that every house in the neighborhood in this new development, they all have solar panels. Okay, so people are willing to pay for them, and they've got it built into the whole scheme of the house, and it works pretty well. But it does. If there was huge demand and it really contributed to value, like folks say that it should, then everybody would have it, but they don't. The other thing is, if you're going to make renovations, or if you're looking to buy an investment property and you think you can come in and you can spend $200,000 or $300,000 on a property, you need to talk to your local expert, whether it's you or other realtors who are doing this, and say, if I buy it for this and spend it for that, can I get that? I'd like to work from backwards. I said, what's the most I can get, or what's the most reasonable price I can get? And then I work my percentages based on the work that needs to be done. And then I can say, okay, if I can sell it for 5, then I can only really afford to buy it for 3. And I can spend 100, 150 on this and still make a profit. But unfortunately, too many investors sometimes will go in and way overspend. And they say, how come I can't get $1 million? Because you're not in $1 million neighborhood. That's why.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So very, very hyper local. Every home's going to be unique. Every home's going to be different. So again, we've kind of talked about broad strokes as it relates to some of these things, and looking at the return on the investment. And know, as you're watching this video, that there's a lot more to it, and get different perspective and get different insights. There are situations where finishing that basement absolutely saw the big return, right? And there's situations where adding that detached garage didn't add any value to the home. So take a look, where's that money going? So Kevin, again, I want to thank you again for taking time to spend and share your knowledge and insight as an appraiser into this community in the video. It's greatly appreciated, and it's always fun to have a conversation. We often will talk about properties. Sometimes it's really easy to price a property because it's in this community. They built 15 of these models, and 3 of them have sold in the last 12 months. And sometimes it's a very unique property they only built one of, and it's in a different scenario. Kevin's the one that I go to for having these conversations. What's the information I need to be looking for? What do I need to be thinking of? So any final parting words?
When you're sick, you call your doctor, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, my wife forces me to call the doctor, yeah.
When you want to talk to me, call theappraiser.com.
Yeah, so call the appraiser at comcast.net.
There you go.
To get in touch with Kevin. You can always reach out to me, and I can put you in touch with Kevin. So awesome. UK, thanks so much. We'll do another video in the future for those watching. And if you've got specific criteria or questions that you want us to discuss, as always, drop a line, let us know. All right. Thanks, y'all.
Sounds good. Enjoyed it, Matt. Have a good day.
You too.